Sometimes less is more, and that can certainly hold true for poetry. Take this single sentence, for example, by Nikita Gill. Teach your daughters their battle cries are needed far more than their silence, and hear them deafen the world with their fearlessness. I mean, think about that for a moment. That's just a small snippet from Wild Embers, a book born out of a fairly new movement called instapoetry, the idea of posting short snippets online for a large audience, something Nikita Gill certainly knows a lot about. Nikita is here with more on her book and more on this instapoet movement. Good to have you in studio with us today.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
What do you think of those terms, instapoet, instapoetry?
I think people like to label things,
Right.
which is kind of why they felt the need to kind of label this movement, because poetry for a long time has been very much academic and very much technical, and it's beautiful and it's interesting to try and make it accessible and try and bring it to such a big audience. And it's wonderful to see so many people connect with it over a platform like Instagram, which is so accessible to so many people.
Does it change the way you write, though, when you know that people are looking at it in a flash and sort of a one-stop shop?
Not really. I try to, on my Instagram, I only share excerpts of my work. I don't tend to share an entire poem. I really do like taking just certain lines that really moved me and affected me and kind of put it onto this platform and see how people react to it. And because I've taken it out of context of a piece which I've written, it's really interesting to see the varied reactions from the community.
You surprised by some of the reaction?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
so?
Always. Well, it's so interesting to see the many, many, many different perspectives that people bring to something. And it really brings to life that saying that, 8 billion people in this world live this day 8 billion ways. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting to see that, yeah.
Let's talk about rejection, because you've talked about that. 137 times you were rejected by publishers. You said you were grateful for that experience, though. How come?
Because writing is a very humbling craft. Rejection in writing is the rule. It's not the exception. So to be able to have that many people have read my work, rejected it, and then turn that into fuel, and then reach the point that I am right now, mm-hmm. I can't have anything but gratitude. I'm grateful for the people who read my work. I'm grateful for the people who've given me the chance. And I'm even grateful for the people who did reject me, because they moved me to be a better writer.
How important is it for you to have people read your work?
I think I'm primarily writing for people to not feel alone. Because when I write, it's usually because I'm feeling alone in these emotions, which are so great and so powerful that I can't even contain them inside my own body. And the idea that there's someone else out there feeling like that, who maybe does not have that outlet, those are the people I'm kind of writing for.
I find that so interesting, because oftentimes you think of poets in sort of a singular way, in a room by themselves, writing their own personal thoughts and feelings, and hoping maybe nobody sees it because it's their way of expressing themselves. When you've written something, do you ever sit there and go, this was a little bit personal? This was a little bit too personal for me to share. Do you have those moments?
All the time.
Oh, you do?
All of poetry.
What do you do about that?
Well, I think being vulnerable is a writer's job, and it's especially a poet's job, because what we're writing is so personal. We're essentially taking our hearts and our souls, cutting them up into pieces, and just going, here you go, make what you will of it. And it is hard, it is difficult, and it can be the most torturous thing you do to yourself. That's why people say poets are they love punishing themselves.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But yeah, it is one of those things that you kind of have to take the risk if you want to be a good writer.
I find it interesting also you say a writer's job. Do you look at this like a job? Sometimes do you look at it like a job, sometimes you don't?
It is now the thing that I do every single day. People go to office and software engineers work with software. People who work on TV, come every day to a TV studio. It's the same way for me. I go to the words. So that way it's now a job. It's what I use to pay the bills.
Sorry, go ahead.
But at the same time, I'm lucky because it is my passion. And not a lot of people have the good fortune to be able to turn their passion into a career. How fortunate am I? I always think that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And maybe that's the good balance that you're connecting with, because often when, a passion turns into a profession, there's a blurred line with especially when it comes to creative, professions like what you're in. So when you start to label it a job, do you lose that creative sense? Do you lose that spontaneity? Do you lose that sense of, this was a passion project and now I'm making a living doing this?
I think I kind of try to look at it from the perspective of I now have the capacity to educate myself in something which I loved so much and I never had the capacity to do it in. And I kind of have now got the opportunity to meet these people who I admired so much and learn from them. And to be able to do that, I wish everyone's jobs made them feel the way that I feel every single day, because I feel incredible to be able to do this,
Have you always written since you were little?
Since I was 12, yeah.
Since you were 12.
Since I was 12.
One of the things when you think about childhood, you think about fairy tales, and that's something you focus on in this book for a section of this book, rewriting the fairy tales that we know so well. And you do have also a book coming out in the fall on rewriting fairy tales. Why was that important to you, and what are you doing to rewrite those stories?
So my mother raised me on fairy tales, and I loved my fairy tales. I used to watch Disney as a child. I read Hans Christian Andersen, the Grimm's fairy tales, which were quite dark. But I've always loved fairy tales. I think the element of there is magic out there somewhere, and we've just forgotten how to recognize it, has always been a part of my body and my soul. So that is why I chose to take that particular element of Wild Embers and turn it into basically its own book. Because I think fairy tales are just, they're things that define society in a lot of ways. And I think those tropes kind of have to be addressed. And I'm trying to use them to empower children to be strong, to have courage, to face anything. So yeah.
I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for being here, Nikita. And congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me.